Welcome back to the Nursing Post podcast, All Nursing All the Time with Ashley and Rosa. In this episode, we discuss the rights and the code of ethics for nurses. Our goal is always to inform and start conversation.
So many people, including nurses, don't realize that nurses actually have rights. There is actually a nurses' Bill of Rights, and there are a total of 7 rights that are included in this bill. And we found this, it's posted just about anywhere you can Google Bill of Rights, but this is from the ANA is where we're going to be discussing them from specifically today. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about that as well as our code of ethics as nurses, because with all the changes and the positions that nurses are being put into, I think we need just a little reminder of what our Bill of Rights are and what our code of ethics are, because this is what we're going to be held to and accountable for.
So to be honest, I didn't even know until we started doing this episode that there was a general Bill of Rights for nurses. I always thought that we were just kind of governed by our own state. Mm-hmm. And that was our go-to, was your state board, which it still is. You still have to follow the rules and regulations to the board, but this kind of opened up my eyes because we've talked about a lot of things that are within these 7 rights. So it's very interesting that this whole entire time we've been talking about it, and I had no idea that all of our concerns or issues or the topics that we had been talking about were actually already part of a Bill of Rights.
Yeah, I knew that we had a Bill of Rights. If you asked me to tell you what they were, I couldn't recite them. It's not something that I think we think much about. I think it was kind of a blurb in nursing school, hey, these are your Bill of Rights.
That's obviously why I didn't remember it.
And I don't think a lot of emphasis was placed on it for multiple reasons now that I've done more research with it. But it is interesting. So the first right is nurses have the right to practice in a manner that fulfills their obligations to society and to those who receive nursing care.
Well, I think in general, people who tend to get into nursing get into it for one of 2 reasons, right? Unfortunately, some are just drawn to the money. But if you really wholeheartely, feel like this is your calling, then your whole purpose of being a nurse is to have a strong commitment to serve your patients and serve your society. That's why this first Bill of Rights even exists, is because naturally, as a nurse, that's what our job is to make people healthy and want to help them get better.
Right. And I think nurses who go into nursing for the money are probably one of the first to get out of it, because
I agree.
The compensation's not there for the amount of stress that you're constantly under.
I agree wholeheartedly. So the next one is nurses have the right to practice in environments that allow them to act in accordance with professional standards and legally authorized scopes of practice. So like I had brought up before, that's that legal scope you would find on your state board of nursing website, because each state is different. Yes. But you had mentioned to me earlier about California, which I found interesting. I don't know if you wanted to share.
So in California, they have set in some standards of what is considered safe and acceptable. And that is a minimum standard. So that way nurses can practice within a way that is safe, that they can care for those patients appropriately. And we're going to get into that in the podcast, in a couple of weeks in more detail. But when you think about the environment that your work is putting you in, if there's no way that a critical care nurse, an ICU nurse, should be taking care of 5 to 6 patients, that just shouldn't happen. If they're critical care, you're looking at 1-to-1 care. If you have semi-stable patient, maybe 1 to 2 at max. So some of these facilities that are ramping up those numbers, that's not safe. And that's not a safe environment that allows them to practice within their standards. We have certain obligations that we're supposed to meet. what time frames we can give meds in based off of their acuity and, turning and repositioning and all the care that has to be done. It has to be done within a certain amount of time. And that's like that for a reason, because it's been studied and known to be effective and, the best care. So it's very interesting that so many of the facilities don't follow this.
It's like you said, the research is out there.
Mhm.
The statistics are out there. The best outcome it even tells you the best outcomes for the patient.
Yes.
But it's like, yet even with that, the organization or your place of employment doesn't actually put that into practice.
Correct.
Which is extremely frustrating, as all nurses know. I'm sure there's not one nurse that is working currently or has worked in the past that can't say, their organization missed a hit or something, in one area or the other.
The third right is nurses have a right to work in an environment that supports and facilitates ethical practice in accordance with the Code of Ethics for Nurses with interpretive statement. We'll get into that in the second part of this podcast here, but again, this mimics the right above this one to me.
Yeah, so integrity is like everything to me. And when I think of ethics, I think of, integrity, I think of morals, it's basically, right versus wrong. And so it's extremely important that the environment that you're working in already has that ethical, moral, and integrity standard in place and is supportive of that.
Nurses should also have the right to freely and openly advocate for themselves and their patients without fear of retribution. And there's so many things I could say about this, but the main thing is that's just not true in our current healthcare setting in the United States.
No. So unfortunately, even though this is part of the Bill of Rights, I think all of us as nurses at one time or another who have tried to speak up and advocate for not even so much themselves, but for a patient or themselves has faced, the consequences of stepping forward. You get that retaliation, that whistleblower mentality. There's so many things up into and including termination. Like here in the state of Virginia, it's a right to work. So honestly, if you sneeze the wrong way, your employer has the right to terminate you. Yeah, they can just make up whatever the hell they want to make up and just be like, sorry, you're not a good fit anymore for the company, or, we're terminating your employment status. And then that's that. Yes. For doing the right thing.
And that's the thing is there's not very, you may be able to fight for unemployment, at that rate. Usually it's about, why did they fire you? Did they give you a reason for being fired? Because if they give you a reason, they do have to back it. They have to have proof of that reason. But otherwise, they don't have to have a reason, and they don't have to give you unemployment either. They can just say the position has been terminated. Call it something different, move on about their day. Absolutely. Which is not, it's our job as nurses to advocate. That's our whole purpose, is patient care. So that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do the right thing by your patient, and for yourself. If I don't feel comfortable, I'll say no. Has that gotten me on somebody's top of their shit list? Of course it has. Been there. But I think when you're doing the right thing, sometimes you're going to make the top of that list. Yep. But you have to do what's best for the patient always. Yeah, but ultimately, I think as a nurse, you have to be okay with people not being okay with you. Exactly. So nurses also have the right to fair compensation for their work, consistent with their knowledge, experience, and professional responsibilities, which it has taken me a few years. Rosa can absolutely attest to this, to be an advocate. And now that I am, it really has opened up a lot. It's kind of funny when you finally start saying, no, I'm not going to do that because that's more responsibility. And if you want me to do that, then we need to talk about my compensation, or you need to have somebody else do that because that's not what I was hired for. You keep learning and gaining new skill sets, and oh, we have to do this, we have to add that, we have to add this, we have to add that. Nurses are constantly having little job duties added. Oh, now it's a new system, so now you have to do XYZ and ABC, or you didn't have to do that before. Well, that's gaining knowledge, that's gaining a skill set, that's learning new software. All those things are valuable.
Yeah, and I feel that, we should be compensated. Yes, nurses make okay pay, but not for everything that we do. And I definitely know that CNAs get the really short end of the stick in terms of compensation. And I will say that until, the clouds above open, but, they don't get paid anything for the amount of work that they do. So it's not that as nurses that we're saying we're not paid anything. We're just saying in general, in this industry of healthcare, that we do a lot of the work and we do not get compensated. We know details in and out of our patients. How many doctors know the ins and outs of their patients? They're depending on us to give them that information.
That's exactly what I was
But they're the ones that are being compensated for it. You see what I'm saying?
The doctors are the ones, this is what's so fun. This is why I do not watch medical stuff on TV. I can't do it because doctors don't ambulate your patients. Doctors are not administering medications unless it's in a code. And usually they're not doing that. The nurses are. They're literally directing.
They're just yelling, out, hey, more atropine or more, this, that, and the third. Yeah, they're not actually doing it themselves. They have somebody else doing it.
Right. And so it is the nurses that are by the bedside that catch all these issues, notify the doctor. So then the doctor can say, okay, now we have to do XYZ. We have to make this decision. It's the nurses who catch the bad decisions, the med errors, and pharmacy as well. I don't want to not give them their credit, but you don't realize the stress that has when you're doing that day in and day out, especially when you're in some type of higher level setting. When you're in outpatient world, most things are not emergent. And if it is an emergency, then there is an emergency room suited for that. It's just amazing to me, the thought process that people have, like, oh, well, nurses, they make pretty good money. You can look at what the average nurse makes, but I want to know how much overtime is included in that, how much mandatory overtime is included in that. And that's the reason they're being compensated. Like, there's a lot of questions you have when you start throwing numbers out there. Because I'm going to tell you that a lot of the nurses around where we work don't make anywhere near $80,000 a year.
Not even close. And, the thing that kind of bothered me when the whole pandemic started was like, your average Joe was like, well, you knew being a nurse that this is what you signed up for.
No, it is not. And
excuse me, but no, that's a damn lie. That we signed up to properly and safely care for patients. That's like telling someone who has joined the military and just finished basic training, doesn't have any experience in the war, and then you're sending them off to the war feeling like they're prepared, and they're not. They're not going to be prepared. They're going to have to, unfortunately, learn while they go through the experience. And that's basically what happened to us in this pandemic. So, and like I said, most of us, I've said this before, most of us did not receive any hazard pay. At least when your military soldiers go overseas, they get compensated for that. They get active duty pay on top of their normal pay. A lot of us nurses didn't get hazard pay for showing up every single day of the pandemic and working.
And I'm going to tell you, the only reason that they started doing that is because nurses were saying, I'm not picking up any more time, I'm exhausted. And the only way to get them to pick up was to offer a substantial amount more money just to try to get them in the door.
Well, and I also feel like Yeah, this bubble is not going to always last. Now you see from everywhere, even, a food chain is offering sign-on bonuses because, they can't get people to show up.
Yep.
But the bubble will not last always. And there are
No.
contingencies with those bonuses. Some of them you don't get that payout until after you've been there for a year or more. So, that's the way they're bringing them in. But that bubble's not going to last always. This pandemic will not go on forever and ever and ever.
Nope. Nurses have the right to a work environment that is safe for themselves and for their patients. And I think that we probably have already covered this because we were just talking about, when all this pandemic hit, there was never the thought process that you wouldn't have PPE.
No, who would have thought that you would run out of surgical masks, let alone
you're talking
N95s,
cavi wipes to clean things, gowns to robe
gloves, all of that were back ordered.
Yep.
The ironic thing I found about that is like when your facility is having to go like on a private sector website to order, we were at one point ordering off of Amazon.
Oh, yeah. Really, you were ordering off anywhere, Amazon,
anywhere that Walmart.
What is it?
Like
Home
it didn't
Depot,
matter.
Office Depot, all of it.
Just to find gloves and face masks. It was crazy. But this is supposed to be our right.
Yes.
But the world just couldn't understand why we were devastatedly upset.
And lastly, nurses have the right to negotiate the conditions of their employment, either as individuals or collectively in all practice settings.
I wish that was the case. I'm not saying that this doesn't happen in other states or maybe in larger cities. I mean, we are in a kind of rural, South Central.
We're in like a rural city.
Ultimately. In Virginia. So I'm not sure, like if in a bigger city, let's say like the capital or, a bigger state like Florida or New York, whether this right is actually enforced by places of employment. But I can assure you the places that I have worked, unfortunately here, I'm talking about SNF, hospital, I'm talking about assisted living. You really don't have the right to negotiate. Basically, this is all we're going to offer, and that you can take it or, you can try your luck somewhere else. They don't care about, the fact that you've been a nurse for 10, 15, 20 years. They don't care what your skill sets are, how many initials you have behind your name. And that's been a lot of the problem with them finding nurses and why a lot of places right now are extremely short.
Yes. So I found this to be very interesting, especially in the wake of everything that has been going on. I really think that this should be posted in every healthcare facility, right by all the OSHA stuff.
Yeah, if you're employing nurses, I think it should be. Not one of these do I feel is unreasonable. All of this is stuff that
all about
we should be practicing. It's all about the patient and our rights as a nurse to be able to use our judgment. Because the first thing the board's going to ask you is about, that nursing judgment. So it's crazy to me that your facility will even tell you against your nursing judgment to, not do something or to do something. I remember an incident that I was working in an ALF and the director asked me to call the doctor for a specific order. I called the doctor. The doctor was like, no, it's not going to change, the outcome or or my treatment. The protocols that I have given should be enough for everyone. For the administrator to come back and tell me, just write it as a verbal order, stick it in the stack of papers. He's not going to read it and he'll sign it anyway. Like, who the hell does that?
Yeah.
You're not a nurse. 2, I already got the directive from the doctor. And 3, that's my license.
Yeah, no.
As I can tell you that I no longer work there. because I
couldn't
can't work for
imagine why.
someone.
No.
Yeah, like I just can't. The fact and the audacity. I'm just like, seriously? The
Yeah, I mean,
audacity of it.
that takes some balls to say that out loud.
Like, did you not hear yourself? And then, they'll try to find any reason, I wasn't a team player because I didn't do that. And I'm like, then call me not a team player. I don't care. At the end of the day, I still have my license.
Which I may not have if I follow suit in whatever you're telling me
Exactly.
to
I would
do.
be in front of the board,
Mhm.
having my license pulled.
And if I was that doctor, I'd be pissed.
It's just crazy to me. It's just, sometimes it's crazy. People think, like I said before, we get paid a lot for what we do, but I think each and every one of us nurses could probably write a book and people would be like, there's no way.
Oh, absolutely.
None of this is true. None of this could ever happen. But
That's
it
exactly
happens
right.
every day. It
That
happens
is,
every day. From unit managers, I've told you the story where a unit manager used to forge my signature.
that's why her
Because
signature is crazy as hell
now
now.
all you guys make fun of my signature because it's so not legible. But that's the reason why I had to like make my signature as sloppy as possible, because I was afraid I was going to be pulled, to the Virginia Board of Nursing, and they're going to be like, why did you do this, that, and the third, when my unit manager was falsifying records? It's like, really?
And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I feel like with as much as like just you've encountered this, and I know that working as a nurse and seeing some things just from a nursing side, I wonder how often this occurs within SNF and long-term care.
It's just crazy to me. That's why these rights are so important. But what good does it do if it's not enforced?
Right. Or if there's fear for retaliation for trying to enforce them.
To enforce them, exactly. And that just brings us, I think these Bill of Rights and the codes of ethics for nurses, they go hand in hand.
They really
Because
do.
if you look at the Bill of Rights, legit for nurses, all of this is common sense.
It really is.
All of this is common sense.
And really, everything we've talked about this before with like physician versus nurses and losing their jobs for things going wrong for whatever reason. Things tend to fall back on the nurse no matter what. And I think it's important that we know these Bill of Rights and that we know the code of ethics, because if you can go to the board and say that doesn't align with our code of ethics and nor our Bill of Rights for nurses, and you can explain yourself, that's going to go a hell of a lot further.
Absolutely.
And well, I did the best that I could.
Yeah, I just did what I was told to do because I was told to do it. I'm going to tell you right now, no board is gonna like.
That's not going to fly.
Yeah, it's not going to fly. They're not going to give you a little slap on the wrist for that one.
No.
Like, you have to educate yourself. As a nurse, you have to know your state boards, rules and regulations. You need to know your scope of practice, what you can and cannot do, because if not, one day you will be in front of the Board of Nursing.
Yeah, and that's not going to be fun.
No, and that mark, whether you had an investigation or not, I know like on our board, State Board of Nursing, let's say you had an offense, you did your time, you paid your restitution, you took the classes that you needed to take, that mark follows your license for the rest of your career. Anytime somebody goes to that website and enters your name to verify that you're legally practicing, it's going to say there's more information, click here.
Yep.
So with the code of ethics, I think we've touched kind of like a lot of that while we were talking into the Bill of Rights. But with the code of ethics, there's about 9 of them. And I think they're all very much common sense things if you are a nurse. But if you're a baby nurse, like a nurse right out of nursing school, it's important for you to know.
Yep.
And there are 9 provisions. The first one states that the nurse practices with compassion and respect for the inherent dignity, worth, and unique attributes of every person. And, at the end of the day, all that is saying is that you are treating every patient as an individual, that you are not grouping or lumping them up. You're not treating them as their diagnosis, but as a person.
And this comes into play a lot, in my opinion, if you have like patients that are in jail, like they're still your patient. They should not be treated differently by you. That there should be the one place you go, and it doesn't matter what you are, what your religious beliefs are. Everybody gets treated with respect and dignity.
Absolutely. The second provision says the nurse's primary commitment is to the patient, whether an individual, family, group, community, or population.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically just an expansion on provision 1. It doesn't matter your race, your ethnical background, your religion, your social economical status. That doesn't matter. When that patient comes through the door, they should be pretty much a blank slate. None of that matters unless it interferes with your ability to nurse. We all know that certain religions don't allow certain things. Some religions don't allow,
blood transfusions.
So of course, that's an important information to have about your patient to provide the best care, but that should not cause you to place judgment on your patient because of their beliefs.
Correct. Provision 3 is the nurse promotes, advocates for, and protects the rights, health, and safety of the patient.
I'm not trying to be funny. That's 101. That's nursing 101.
Well, some of these things are just like, be a good person.
And do the right thing even when nobody's watching.
Exactly. Provision 4 is a nurse has the authority, accountability, and responsibility for nursing practice, makes decisions, and takes action consistent with the obligation to provide optimal patient care. So in medicine,
basically, what is that telling you?
So to me, that is, within medicine, we practice based upon guidelines. So if a doctor is telling you to give a medicine that's completely against any guideline, that you should stop and say, no, that's not with current standards. We don't do that. That's not safe. That's not best practice. So you need to be, as a nurse, informed, and that you will be held accountable if you don't speak up against something that's not right.
I do not trust, and I've grown more cynical, I think, the longer that I've been a nurse, because when you're a baby nurse, you just automatically kind of assume, oh, that doctor went to school longer than you. They know more than you. But like I've said before, we spend the most time with them. So they're seeing them for 5 minutes and we're there with them for 8, 12, 16-hour shifts. So really use your nursing judgment, because it doesn't matter whether, if they're a doctor and they have more experience than you, because as Ashley has said already, how many mistakes have doctors made that nurses followed through and carried out. That doctor is still practicing, and there are a lot of nurses that aren't.
Right. And this is a prime example of this. I had a patient years ago that was a very brittle diabetic, and her sugars were reading high on glucometer. And the doctor on call wanted me to give her, I can't remember how many units of, fast acting insulin. And I said, it's going to bottom her out. He's like, no, absolutely not. She's like at the point where she needs to go to the hospital. I'm like, I'm telling you, I know this patient. And I explained, I'm like, she will read this now. I'll give her that many units. She's going to go to the hospital.
Yeah, but it'll be for the opposite reason.
I was like, this on a normal patient, I would say all day long, I probably will be calling you back for more. I'm telling you, with her, it's going to bottom her out. I was like, I would start with half of that dose. And if it doesn't bring it down within a certain amount of time, you give me a time frame, I'll give her the next dose. You give me a parameter, but I'm telling you, if I give her this, she's going to bottom out. And he's like, seriously? I'm like, seriously. She had a lot of health issues, and her sugars would swing from 40 to 500 in an instant. And so
it's crazy.
It was very difficult to manage her. And our normal on-call provider knew that. So we're only given like a couple of units at a time, even though her sugars are crazy high. A nurse that would walk in that doesn't know that patient would be like, that ain't going to do shit. But if you knew the patient, it was a completely different story. He actually listened to me. I gave the medicine. He actually called me back to check on that patient. I work night shift. He called me back in the middle of the night to check on the patient. He said, can you go recheck her glucometer? I was like, yep. I walked. I was like, you know, do you want to wait? You want me to call you back? He's like, I'll wait. I literally went, checked her sugar, came back, told him what it was. And he's like, dang, you weren't lying.
And that just, I think that brings us into the fifth provision. It says the nurse owes the same duties to self as to others, including the responsibility to promote health and safety, preserve wholeness of character and integrity, maintain competence, and continue personal and professional growth. If you don't take it upon yourself to learn and know your patients,
that's on you.
Yes, it falls back on you, and it always will. If you don't continue your education professionally, you are doing a disservice to your patients.
Provision 6 is the nurse, through individual and collective effort, establishes, maintains, and improves the ethical environment of the work setting and conditions of employment that are conducive to safe and quality healthcare.
I think you, Ashley, more than anybody, practice this 1,000% out of all the nurses I've ever worked with, you know, besides myself. We both are very firm believers of that. And I know because we are so, I'm tactfully blunt, I will say.
I'm not.
You're working on it.
It's okay.
You can work on it, but I am older than you, and it's taken me years to kind of develop that. But because of that, you know, we've been placed in situations in which, you know, the outcomes haven't always been favorable for us. And at the end of the day, I'm okay with that.
Yes.
Like I said, you should be doing the right thing even when no one's watching. You should definitely always do the right thing even when somebody's watching. So I sleep at night like a baby.
And I'm that way. And I don't, not just with my patients, but my coworkers as well. Like I'm a firm believer in no, this is not acceptable.
Like, you can't treat that person that way. It may not be any of my business, like what's going on with that said person. But if it affects your patient and the patient's outcome, then it is my business. It becomes my business when it affects the patients.
I just gotten to the point to where I've realized really it's very much all connected, because if there is a glitch anywhere with no matter what, it's been a while since I've worked in a hospital setting, but if something is not right with the HUC and somebody's being nasty to the HUC, say an APP comes and they have their ass on their shoulders, they're rude to the HUC, then the HUC's not thinking right. You know, they're supposed to be getting, you know, really help kind of managing the unit a little bit, helping the nurse, but they're upset because somebody was a jerk to them, and then they're not working at their best, which in turn affects the unit. Just like with an outpatient, somebody says something nasty, whether it's another nurse, or if it's somebody more clerical, then they're not on their A game, and then they forget that they had a message to give to me, and now that's a delay in patient care. Like, it's all connected. So if I hear somebody being an ass for no reason, I'm calling them on it. I'm over. Like,
I mean, we've both done that. at the place of employment where we met, like how many times had I had to tell a particular nurse practitioner, like, that's out of line.
Yeah.
Like, you need to go back and apologize to that person.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I've had to tell, that same nurse practitioner who sometimes you just didn't know what you were going to get some days.
Yeah.
It's like the Forrest Gump box of chocolates kind of a thing. And some days she would come in and she would be like
the
cruising
nicest
at five.
person.
Yeah, the nicest person cruising at 5 miles per hour. And then the next thing you know, like she was at 100. And I would have to tell her, you know what, you're at 100. You need to bring that down to about 25.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I had as you know, it was a little bit of a tough time for me because I'm not as tactful. So if you're being rude and nasty, I'm just like, Rose is like, you're at 100. You need to be, back here. And I'm just like, you don't need to be that rude, people.
It's true. But that's why I love you.
Like there's not a lot of gray that goes on in this area.
But the thing is so funny to me. It doesn't matter how you say it. Like I could say right now you're at 100 and you need to bring it down to about 25. And you can tell them that was rude. They still take it the same way. It doesn't matter how it was delivered.
Yeah.
They're like in shock and awe. Like, I can't believe you said that to me. Well, I can't believe you just said what you said. That's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of how I think, which I think is kind of the thing. It's like, if you want the blunt, fast answer, just ask Ashley. If you want to, feel a little better about it, you can ask Rosa. The outcome is the same typically, but the approach is different.
Yeah, I just think it's because I've had like experience as being like in human resources. Like I've fired people and they didn't even realize that they were being terminated. You know what I mean? It's just like I've had to learn how to be tactful.
Yeah. And you
dealing with different people, it's hard. You have to kind of feel people out and engage people. You can't treat everybody the same. No nurse treats every patient the same because they're not. No. So you have to kind of like, it's a struggle sometimes working with your coworkers or providers. Mm-hmm. I mean, good and well, I've told a lot of doctors where they can go and how to get there. But sometimes that's just what you have to do.
Yeah, well, you treat me with respect, I'll treat you with respect. If you treat me like an asshole, I'm going to treat you like an asshole. Yeah,
I'm sorry. Well, actually, I'm not sorry. So another provision is the nurse collaborates with other health professionals and the public to protect human rights, promote health diplomacy, and reduce health disparities. This is, it kind of goes back to number one, number two. We are advocates.
Yes.
Period. Mm-hmm. And we should be calling out other health professionals, the public, to promote this. I think we ourselves have done a good job. I always think there's room for improvement, but I would be the first one to say, hey, that's not right.
Yeah.
Like you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You know what I'm saying? You don't know the reason for this, that, and the third. Like your personal viewpoint doesn't matter. Like Correct. Your care matters. The last provision is the profession of nursing collectively through its professional organizations must articulate nursing values, maintain the integrity of the profession, and integrate principles of social justice into nursing and health policy. I remember in the beginning of this, Ashley, like, you're not into politics at all. Like, you've never been, you really don't give a fudge. Right. But I had always told you, I was like, that's kind of like, I did tell you, I was like, that's kind of impossible because politics and healthcare, they go hand in hand.
They do.
There's no way for them not to. At least in this country, I can't say in other countries that that's the case because a lot of other countries provide health care for their citizens at no charge, Right. But here in America, it's commercialized, it's capitalist, there's lobbyists.
Yeah.
And
It's a
so
business in the United
it's
States.
a business at the end of the day. Your patient, the only time I feel like a patient is a patient is either through the nurse or that doctor. For the
Mhm.
organization, they're just a big dollar sign.
That's absolutely correct.
Legit, you can go to the hospital, get a Tylenol. They're going to charge you $20 for 2 damn Tylenols that you could have actually went to the dollar store and paid $1.50 for like a pack of 500.
Yep.
So, it's all about the dollars and cents when it comes to organizations and your workplace.
Absolutely.
So as nurses, it is important for us to be able to articulate and maintain our integrity, and make sure that we're practicing these things in the rights and for, advocating for the rights of our patients.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me with the politics is I really don't care what you believe. It really doesn't make me any difference at all. I'm open-minded enough to
make your own decision about that situation.
Right. Like, I'm not going to like you or dislike you based off of a couple of views that you have. I'm very much more off of the person that you are. And if your political beliefs makes you a particular kind of person, I'm probably not going to like you because that's very narrow-minded. And that's my opinion. Of course, I feel that nursing as a profession in the United States, most of us have good values. I think most of us want a particular outcome for our patients. The bad part is the entities that are in place that are supposed to help nurses with that are in bed with so many of the hospital organizations that it's not bringing to light the right care.
It's not. I mean, we all know, let's say, the prison system in general, and I'll be really short on this because it could be a whole nother topic. Person that comes into the prison system is a dollar sign.
Yeah.
People can say what they want, but they're dollar signs. They're dollar signs for, the jail itself, because they have basically free labor. I'm just saying. And if you have a health collective in that prison, they're dollar signs. So honestly, it's a topic that if you turn on the news today, like nurses are talking about this. They're talking about it and they need to know about it.
Well, I think just most nurses have just gotten to the point of frustration where we have said the same thing multiple times. Nobody's listening. So at some point it's going to be like, what is it going to take for us to make you hear us? And I have a feeling that a lot of nursing entities are going to start becoming unionized, especially after certain ones of the pandemic are the ones that are going to be making headway. I think it's going to end up being that you're going to see a lot more unions within the nursing field to have somebody fighting because we don't have the organizations that should be having our back fighting for us. And so it's going to be like, great, you don't have PPE, then you don't have nurses. And they're going to make these hospitals be accountable.
And I think it's about time, because honestly, the real question today is, why aren't our rights and ethics enforced by our employers or organizations that we work for?
Or
why
if
aren't
we try
they?
to enforce them, why are we going to be terminated for it?
Exactly. I agree. We would love to hear your thoughts and comments, especially those who are in the nursing field, healthcare in general. So please visit our website, the nursingpostpodcast.com, for any of the references listed if you're interested in reading more in depth about the Bill of Rights and our Code of Ethics. You can find our podcast on your favorite platform. Be sure to subscribe, share your thoughts, and thanks again for listening to the Nursing Post.